went on to win the NBA championship that season. Being a dominant offensive player is hard to do, and so is being dominant defensively. But being dominant on both ends of the court simultaneously is especially difficult. In the last 15 years, no player has averaged at least 30 points per game while making the NBA's first team all-defense. The last player to do that was the dynamic two-way player Kobe Bryant in 2007. The player who most recently did it before that was again Kobe Bryant in 2006. And before that, Kobe Bryant in 2003. Goes to show just how rare of a talent the Mamba truly was. If you think you're having a bad day, let me tell you about the day that this guy once had. This is James Ray, a 6'8" power forward who played 3 seasons for the Denver Nuggets, and once upon a time, he was the 5th overall pick in the 1980 NBA draft. Well, on December 9th, 1982, in a regular season matchup against the Washington Bullets, James had a really bad game. On the night, he scored 0 points, he had 0 rebounds, and he dished out 0 assists. But he did have 6 turnovers. The guy might as well have been wearing a Bullets jersey. But here's the best part. He achieved his 6 turnovers in only 4 minutes of playing time. Again, his stat line was 0, 0, 0, and 6 turnovers in only 4 minutes of action. How this guy kept a roster spot after this performance is honestly beyond me. It's a simple rule in the NBA. If you get 6 personal fouls, you're disqualified from the game, usually. In 2014, the league had to make an exception and enforce a little-known rule. During a regular season match with the Cleveland Cavaliers, the struggling and injury-laden Lakers only had 8 players to suit up for the game. With just over 3 minutes left in the 4th quarter, the Lakers' Robert Sacre received his 6th personal foul, which meant that under normal circumstances, he would be disqualified from the game. The thing is, the Lakers' Chris Kaman had already fouled out, and their other role players, Nick Young and Jordan Farmar, had sustained in-game injuries that sent them to the locker room. That means that the Lakers only had 5 available players before Sacre's 6th foul. If he had been disqualified for his 6th, the Lakers would have only had 4 players, which is too few to have on the court. Well, according to the NBA rulebook, in this situation, if a team lacks a replacement player, said player shall remain in the game and shall be charged with a personal foul and a team foul. Even though Robert Sacre received his 6th foul, hypothetically, he could have received 106 fouls and he still would have remained in the game. Seems like an interesting exploit that could have been put to use during the Hack-a-Shaq era. There are blockbuster trades, there are 3-team deals, and then there's whatever the hell happened in 2005. It was the largest trade in NBA history, centered around quality pieces like Jason Williams and Antoine Walker. In total, 5 teams were involved and 13 players. On the screen is the list of the teams and players. Sometimes it seems nearly impossible for just 2 teams to agree upon terms, but somehow all 5 managed to make it work on this one. I can only imagine the amount of phone calls and hours that went into a deal like this. Steph Curry is really good at making 3-point shots. In fact, he's the greatest to ever do it. Ben Simmons, on the other hand, not so much. So the question is, if Ben Simmons was determined to break Steph's 3-point record at all cost, just how long would he have to play in order to do it? Well, the short answer is a really long time. But to be more specific, he would have to play roughly 171,000 games, around 2,500 seasons, and he would break the record around the year 45-14. So keep it up, Ben. Just remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. One of Russell's greatest friends, and throughout his career, one of his greatest rivals, was the legendary center, Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt and Bill had a legendary rivalry for the ages, as the Giants clashed on a regular basis, as they both attempted to assert their dominance over the league. One of the reasons their rivalry is so legendary is because of how many times these 2 competitors battled it out. Some of the other greatest rivalries of NBA history would be Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird, Michael Jordan versus Isaiah Thomas, LeBron James versus Steph Curry, Shaquille O'Neal versus Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Durant versus Russell Westbrook. But what's crazy is that all of these other great rivalries combined still don't have as many games played against each other as Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain had by themselves, as the two battled it out a total of 143 times throughout their careers. Bill was never known to be an explosive scorer, but he did impact the game in numerous other ways, primarily with his rebounding, defense, and passing. With that being said, in the history of the league, there have only been 9 times where a player has averaged less than 20 points per game and still won the league MVP. Astonishingly, Bill Russell has 5 of those specific MVPs, which is more than the rest of league history altogether. Speaking of Bill's non-offensive impact, many people often consider him as the greatest defensive player to ever live. But unfortunately, many of our modern-day defensive statistics didn't exist during his career. But one of the ones we do have are his defensive win shares. He didn't just dominate this stat, but based on how much he owned it, the stat might as well be named after him. Bill played a total of 13 seasons in the NBA, and incredibly, he led the league in defensive win shares in 11 of those seasons. Second place on the all-time list doesn't even have half as many seasons as Russell did, which was George Mikan and Tim Duncan, who led the league 5 times apiece. The oldest player in the history of the league was an astonishing 45 years old. But even crazier than that is the fact that the oldest rookie to ever play was also 45 years old. They were the same player. Nicholas J. Hickey, more commonly referred to as Nat Hickey, was the head coach of the Providence Steamrollers in 1948. The thing is, his team was awful, with a losing record of only 4-25. In a desperate attempt to help his squad, Hickey activated himself for 2 games, but it was all in vain as he shot 0-for-6 in those games. The Steamrollers went on to lose both games and finished the season with a 6-42 record. He retired as a player just 2 days before his 46th birthday. Tracy McGrady scored arguably the easiest basket in the history of the game. It came on opening night of the 07-08 season against the Los Angeles Lakers. If you want to know how rough things were for Kobe before Pau Gasol showed up, then look no further than this clip. The ball is deflected by Derek Fisher, which is then up for grabs between Kwame Brown and Luke Walton, but somehow Luke and Kwame managed to bobble it into the Rockets' basket. Despite the fact that Los Angeles tipped it in, it counted as 2 points for Houston, and based on the NBA's rules, the bucket is credited to the nearest Houston player to the basket, which was Tracy McGrady, who was standing a step inside of the three-point line 20 feet away from the basket, and he didn't even touch the ball on that possession. Getting buckets doesn't get much easier than that. If your team ends up getting the first overall pick, you're probably going to be a very excited basketball fan. But history tells us that you might want to temper those expectations a bit, as first overall picks are a bit more of a crapshoot than you might think. In the history of the league, there have been 76 first overall picks, and surprisingly, only 45 of those have gone on to be NBA All-Stars. Furthermore, only 29 of those picks have ended up making at least 3 All-Star teams. And probably the most damning stat of them all is the fact that only 11 out of 76 first overall picks end